Welcome to the podcast. This is Duderonomy. I'm Dan.
I'm Bryan.
And we're going to be talking about the 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Not a radical new idea by any stretch of the imagination. We've got plenty of great turtle podcasts out there going minute to minute and episode to episode and movie to movie and analyzing things. But we figured, you know what? We haven't done that yet, so we're going to
bring our unique voices as two 35, 36-year-old white men.
Very unique. So yeah, we are going to go through the 87 show as far as our attention span will keep us from the original cartoons, as we're both aging turtle heads, and we're going to talk about what the episodes mean to us as aging millennials, and maybe start looking at some of the stuff that separates it from the newer iterations where they appeal to a different generation and a different type of demo and audience, and you know where that common ground really kind of lies, hence the Duderonomy and the different affirmations that we take away and what Turtles means to us.
So part of my desire of doing this is that I started listening to a podcast called The Mutant Ages from Maddie Myers and Ryan Pagella. Sorry if I pronounced the last name wrong. But where they go through all the different animated X-Men properties. And in the first episode, they start talking about like, well, what are your what are your credentials? What makes you a good voice for the Ninja Turtles? I think that's like a really interesting way to start, of like, what is our background with the franchise? Why do we want to talk about this?
That's a great way to start. Dan, take it away.
Okay, so I was born in '86, which is like shortly after the comics were originally written, and so by the time like Turtle Mania, quote unquote, was in full swing, I think both of us were like kind of peak age to just fall in love with that whole thing.
Oh,
so
when you look up the demographic for original Ninja Turtles, it's just a picture of us in the dictionary.
And like I was introduced by my sister, my eldest sister, read the comics, and then when they started the animated series, she was like, "You'll love this," and she like just got me into it. And I remember getting because there was like merchandise for everything. She had these like small, I think they were like car pillows. They were supposed to be like hung in the window of your car or something. It had a suction cup and a hook,
like the Garfield things,
I guess. And she had a Raphael one and a Leonardo one, and she gave me one of them. And from that point on, I was kind of like just obsessed with it.
Yep.
What really threw me over the edge, which was the movie, which I know at some point we will do a full episode on, but we will probably quote endlessly and refer to it endlessly.
That'll be our big celebration when we get 10 subscribers.
Oh yeah. And yeah, from there I was just like, I was full in on it. Watched the animated series, watched the Coming Out of the Shells tour on pay-per-view, like my
Hell yeah.
Had like a ton of the action figures and toys, which I've a video podcast. You could see my pride and joy, my 5th anniversary collectible gold Leonardo statue. Still in the box, even though I got it when I was like 7 or something.
I don't have that kind of self-control. I don't know how you do that.
Yeah. So that's me. This is fun for me because this is going to be the first time that I rewatched the original series since I was a child.
I don't think it's been that long for me. Maybe it's in its entirety, but I've definitely rewatched the tunes a few times, but interspersed with all the other different iterations. The only one I'm really not caught up on is the latest rise of the TMNT. It was skewed a little young for me and a little harder to watch for whatever reason. But yeah, I was born and raised on the 87 cartoon, like every good kid born through Reaganomics. And, you know, I quickly discovered the movie and realized that there was more to the Turtles. I actually remember as a child, I was far more emotionally inconsolable when I found out that the Ninja Turtles weren't real than when I found out that Santa Claus wasn't real. I locked myself in my room for hours. And then when I was somewhere in my preteens, my dad got me an issue of the Turtle comics from the original Mirage run, which I had never even touched. And it was the finale of City at War. And I read that and I went, well, I'm all grown up now, and realized how dark Turtles got, and I went down that rabbit hole, never really looked back. And I'm going to go ahead and put this out here on Front Street now. And in retrospect, the 87 cartoon has become my least favorite iteration of the Turtles. That's not to say I don't like it, but I've definitely gotten far more into the Mirage comics and the weird stuff, the very Peter Lairdy stuff, the why don't they just go to space and fight aliens stuff.
Yeah. So my introduction to the comics, funny enough, was the Image run, and I think my first issue was TMNT and Savage Dragon.
Wow.
It was just the most recent one that my sister Maura had picked up, and she was like, "You love the Ninja Turtles, you'll like this." And it was like such a culture shock, the same way that like you had with City at War, where it's like, wait, they're drinking beer and they're cursing and they're like very obviously killing people. What is going on?
God, the Image was a whole nother beast to itself, but that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
I had an older cousin, and I think this is ultimately my biggest takeaway from Turtles. I'm an only child, and I had this older cousin who I really looked up to, and he was the one who showed me the movie. He gave me a copy of the soundtrack on cassette tape, which I currently have framed, signed by Partners in Crime, sitting on my wall. And he was the one who kind of showed me the whole surrogate family aspect of it. And it was, as someone who grew up always wanting like brothers or something like that, that meant a lot to me. You know, I've always been really close and tight with my friends group, and always kind of perceived them as my brothers. And that's the part of Turtles that always appealed to me, is that overarching family concept.
I think it is impossible to read, watch, however you consume the Ninja Turtles and not come away with that same mentality of like your friends can be just as important as family, as your blood family, and that sometimes more so depending on your personal experiences. And I always think that is just one of the best things about the franchise as a whole.
That and the original theme song.
Oh my God. It's a banger. I wrote like my first note from watching episode 1 is that opening theme is a banger.
There's our segue into the formal podcast now that we've gotten the pleasantries out of the way, because that was one of the first notes I had. Has yet to beat the theme song. As much as I actually like a lot of the other themes, like even Rise of the TMNT had a great reiteration of this original theme. That beat has been so consistent throughout. Like they brought it back for 2012, 2003 animated series was the first big departure from it, but it kept largely the spirit. But you will never beat Fred Wolf's original theme song. It's law.
Yeah, I at some point, a future episode, we should have a list that is our rankings of the themes.
Ooh, I like that.
I think we'll land pretty closely to each other, but we'll have to see.
So we're both watching these online digitally. Are they? They're not remastered, but they're quote unquote HD.
It's still standard definition, even at least the Google Play ones I'm watching.
Is it okay? Because I'm watching on Vudu and I forgot to check. I have the DVD box sets, but they are aging very poorly. So I don't know if there's any discrepancies, because sometimes when they bring these shows over to digital, sometimes licensed music and stuff gets messed up. Sometimes they're edited out of order or stuff like that. If anything, I think that by now the digital quote unquote box sets that we're seeing online are arguably the most authentic. But if anybody wants to call us out on that, feel free. So episode 1, Turtle Tracks, with the wrong art, which was like an overarching theme in this show, was having the wrong art. It's a picture of Leonardo wearing Michelangelo's orange bandana holding swords.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say. The first thing I was actually gonna comment on, of like a difference between the digital version and at least my memory of some of the like VHSs as a kid. I'm remembering specifically the ones that you got with like at Burger King, if you remember.
Oh, like the Burger King Kids Club tapes that were like 2 episodes at a time or something.
Yeah, but they always opened up with the family home entertainment of it, like letters being written out on the old like first grade spacing of
the notebook paper.
And like not seeing that at the beginning of the episode was like, oh wow, this is weird.
It's like watching Star Wars without the 20th Century Fox logo fanfare. Feels naked. Yeah, there's something there. There's a whole episode there about some of the Pavlovian responses that we have with how a lot of this media was packaged back in the day. And I'm going to go ahead and just say it. The first movie with the Pizza Hut commercial.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, same thing goes for the FHE logos, New Line Cinema with the movies. All that stuff kind of plays in, just like the old fanfare.
Just following up, because this might be our first difference, but the Turtle Tracks title card on the Google Play version is Leonardo eating a pizza.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
And was I wrong?
That might be
Either
for the
way.
second episode, but remember that. But I just noticed because I have the episode playing in the background.
Well, my point remains the same as it is Leonardo eating a pizza. You're right. My point remains the same. Animation errors are a recurring thing, like a notorious thing with this show. So we'll be touching on plenty of that.
Even just in this episode.
That all was a very long, unnecessary segue into my first big takeaway. The art is so ugly. It really, in the retrospect, I remember watching the show, and for what it's worth, that's not an insult. That is a product of the times. It is a stylistic choice, and it works. But the art is so ugly. Everybody has giant cheekbones and weird pointy chins, and everybody just kind of looks and sounds like a caricature of a slug of I don't know. My train of thought is completely lost, but it's hideous, right?
So I don't know. I don't want to say it's like good because it's definitely like you said, it's like product of the times, but there's something of it that, like, I guess the nostalgia of it, I'm really enjoying, because not only is it like, obviously, TMNT for my kid, like from when I was a kid, but just the design of it as a whole is like very 1980s punk meets Jetsons kind of thing.
Wow, that's a perspective I never really thought about before.
I mean, look at the car that the punks like first tear apart, right?
Oh,
like,
that's a car?
It could totally be straight out of the Jetsons.
That's supposed to be a car. You're telling me that's a car. The thing that makes Ecto 1 look like a regular sedan.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially the Cybertruck before it existed, but
what is wrong with the It is the friggin' Cybertruck. Jesus H. Oh, man. Yeah, I mean, okay, I do want to backpedal. I'm not saying that the art's not good. It is good. It's very good, especially in this first season, and it takes a hard nosedive after that, and we'll talk about that later. But the art quality is fantastic for its time. It's kinetic. It's relatively consistent within reason. But just the design choices, like, clearly they just want everybody to look like a monster even before they get to the mutagen.
Yep. I also, like, the first thing that I love is the crime montage. Even just like the little, like, there's a guy who has a peg leg for no reason when they're like spray painting the wall. There is, like, right when you first, first few people, there's a guy with a peg leg,
and he's just like graffitiing the ground, which is doing a whole lot of good.
And then there's a guy the third guy in with the white hat has like a bad Watchman shirt on, like a knockoff Watchman smiley face.
He does. Wow, you're picking up on a lot of these little design details better than I did.
It's just like, it's such a hilarious idea for like, how do we show New York City is a real hellhole at this period of time while still being appropriate for children? And it's like, well, they'll Looney Tunes tear apart the car in seconds, and then they'll spray paint a guy into the wall.
And what is inarguably really beautifully designed graffiti. Like, it's truly art. Yeah, and like everybody just looks like a bad, like a forgotten character from the Warriors.
Exactly, yeah.
Here's something that really kind of caught me off guard. I did not realize how often voices were reused, and this is something I definitely have not picked up on over the years. But like, even Rob Paulson was like a random guest that April interviews in the beginning about the crime wave. It's clearly Rob. Never pieced that together after 30 years, just figured it out.
All the news team in the beginning is all the Turtles as well. Like,
not Vernon.
Not Vern, but the two other guys.
Yeah. But there's a lot of that too. I did not even realize this. Was Cam Clark always Rocksteady?
I don't know. I mean, I'm rewatching it now, so I guess we'll find out if it changes, but like that, it's unmistakable, right?
Yeah. But I did not ever realize that until this most recent watch through.
Some of my observations are going to get really granular too, but some of it is just like really funny to me. Like April has two microphones for no reason. Like she has a headset microphone, but she still talks into her own like handheld one before passing it over to whoever she's talking about.
You're a sound guy. You know how redundancy works.
The first guy that she's interviewing who can like rattle off all of the names of the missing science equipment but doesn't have a clue of what it does.
Yeah.
Such a great early joke in the episode.
The comedy was spot on for the first few seasons. I know the show stayed pretty funny throughout, but some of that writing in the original run was really something to be revered, because like it's got a very goofy slapstick, almost 1950s serialized like Tex Avery kind of appeal to it.
Yeah. The CSI guy is probably my favorite part of the whole episode because he sees a bunch of cuts in the door. 100% that's a samurai sword. Gotta be ninjas. Oh, and this rope, it says it's made in Japan, so obviously it's the work of ninjas. Like I don't know if it's like it was funny as the jump that this guy made for the convenience of the episode.
Oh yeah, there's so many writing conveniences. I don't know, I picked up on this one, but Shredder completely dunks on the guy who's like, how did he say, is like, we got all this advanced equipment or something like that, and then like the camera backs out and Shredder's sitting in a giant fucking TV observation room with like a space age monitor that can see everywhere. Also, where the hell does he get all these cameras?
Right, yeah. He's surveying everything. You could have the most advanced technology in the world. Like, did he precursor drones, or is he just hacking into every camera? There's only one instance in the first episode where they pan up and acknowledge that he's just watching through a security camera. Did he put that camera there? Is he just hacking the net and like looking through the camera that the pizza parlor hung up? Maybe. You don't ever explain it. But also, how does he get a tracking shot when he's following Splinter through the sewer? There's so much, it makes no sense how he's just able to see everything at all times. They're just like, yeah, he does it. And it gets even better as the episode goes on, but I don't want to like skip forward to that yet.
Well, it's just like that became a thing. You know, every villain has a big observation room, right? Dr. Claw and Inspector Gadget. I mean, even the Shredder in the movies had that wall of TVs, but at least that made logical sense.
Yeah, and he was just watching the news on every one of them.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like the contrived convenience is amazing when it comes to like how the bad guys are bad. Like they are bad because they are aware.
I have the first of quite a few lines that didn't age well, but this one for a different reason than the other ones, which is April saying, "We're the news media, for crying out loud. Who'd want to hurt us?" Like, ooh,
yikes!
That's some bad news for you, April.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one to kind of revisit, is how many things did not age well. There's definitely more than a few not so sensitive racial references.
Oh my god, this episode is just full of casual racism.
Yikes! Yeah, Ninja Pizza Parlor was definitely a peak on that one.
Even like the first one is the CSI guy looking at the rope. Well, it's obviously ninjas because the rope came from Japan. Not like hugely offensive, but just like, what are you talking about?
I mean, that is definitely another, we're going to use this term a lot, product of the times, because everything in the 80s was ninjas, right?
Yeah.
That's how we ended up how we are, is that everything we consumed from Ninja Turtles to Power Rangers to anime was all ninjas.
Yeah, but at the same time, there was this like, there was a lot of hatred for Japan at the time because of a perceived like technological advantage in the 80s. So like obviously it wouldn't have hit us as children, but like adults at the time, there's a lot of records. There's like really horrible things that came out of the auto industry at the time too. But there's a line later in the episode, again, like jumping the gun here, but there's a line that Shredder, like when Shredder came from Japan to America, he says like, "I got my advanced technology when I came here." Like, what what are you talking about? Like, it's
Well, because Krang is recently received his citizenship, so that's what he meant.
right. Like, the world of the show, he got this new technology from Krang, but like the way he says it is like it feels like the writer was saying something there, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's nothing new either. I mean, look at the entire philosophy behind the concept of Superman. You know, the ultimate immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
We can get into more of that again later. There's
For
definitely
sure.
going to be some recurring amount of that. I wanted to point out when the turtles first rescue April and they bring her back. For one, that fight scene is just kind of beautiful in the sewer. I always thought that was dope how the turtles enter in all shadow.
Oh yeah.
But when
Again,
they
like
finally,
for a kids show, they do a really great job of pulling out the things from the comics that would have been like really important character beats.
Yeah.
For such early on.
Yeah. Well, when they get her back to the sewer lair and she finally meets their pet rat Splinter, as she puts it.
Yep.
I could not hear when he offers April some hot tea. Lucille from Arrested Development going, because that's what you are.
A hot tea.
Could not hear that in her voice. So just had to point that one out.
But before the turtles are introduced, there's a couple of things I liked, which is that the foot punks already episode 1 are complete idiots because they try and rip out a sewer drain.
Yeah. How long have they lived in New York?
Like, and I'm glad that they found the manhole cover pretty quickly, but it's like, dude, it's right there. And also, the turtles are the worst ninjas.
Oh, they really are. They're just kind of like throwing bodies around and rolling.
And also, like, they've been hidden for like, what, 13 years or something. And then they see one woman and they're like, yeah, okay, let's just show her what we look like and take her back home.
I mean, that tracks for teenagers in the 80s. I wanted to say, like, the whole running gag with the gnarly, gross pizza flavors was a stroke of genius.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was another brilliant piece of the 80s culture come true. Yeah, I mean, it's hung on a little bit. Kids still like gross stuff. I don't know how many toys are out there where it's about pooping, but a lot of kids' toys are about pooping now. But we were all about the barf when we were growing up, and the creepy crawlers, literally and figuratively. So yeah, the entire idea of like the gnarly sardine marshmallow pizza stuff, stroke of genius, because I don't know about you, but I definitely tried to replicate those when I was a kid.
I still remember the pizza thrower toy and all the designs that it had on each individual disc, which was like, again, it came from the series, but it was like, there's a colorful aspect to it. It is visually interesting.
It was visually interesting, and it was also just kind of like societally interesting because I don't know. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with going to a McDonald's or the movie theater and filling up your cup with every flavor of soda pop, trying to invent that genius new food stuff that is like the ultimate food stuff. So I definitely poured cereal on my pizza more than a few occasions, and it never did really pan out.
So it sets up going to be an ongoing joke of April or some human companion being like, I don't know which is worse, the weird pizza or the sushi.
Yeah. I'm going with the sushi because I can't eat raw fish, but yeah.
I mean, like, being an adult, like, sushi's good, but like, I also don't know if I would trust sewer sushi.
Made by a rat, no less. Here's something that the show did earlier than I even realized. Like, I've always been kind of intrigued by some of the educational aspects and what Turtles motivated me to get into. You know, like, obviously it's like, oh, cool, teenagers fighting bad guys, but it's just like, also it made me interested in turtles. I ended up having a pet turtle, and I just thought turtles were kind of fascinating as animals. I think I've talked to you about this before, but like in the new Rise of the TMNT show, they're all different species, and like that was my first takeaway when I found that out, was like, oh, they're leaning into the surrogate family thing. But also, like, if I was a kid and the Ninja Turtles were all different species of turtles, I would immediately go try to research and figure out more about turtles. Like, what's a snapping turtle? What's a red-eared slider? What's a soft shell? What's a box turtle? And I would want to learn all about that stuff. But the things that happened more in the older series from 87 to even 2003 was some of the cultural terminology. So pretty early on in the episode, maybe just before the halfway point, Splinter drops the term Shidoshi.
Yeah.
Which was something like, what the hell is that? And then like in 2003, they follow the art of Bushido. And then even in the most recent IDW comics, you know, they're talking about how the hierarchy works and the Chunin and the Ronin.
Yeah. I didn't even really pick up on that because I mean, I feel like when I was a kid, I wasn't doing that kind of research. I wasn't doing that until I got like way older. But I did have that same kind of reaction that a lot of kids had, which was like, "Oh my God, please sign me up for karate. I want to go. I want to take a karate class." Like,
that's exactly it. You know, I'm not going to try to pretend like suddenly I was well versed in all of Japanese culture, but the concept of like, oh, a ninja is a real. There's a lot of things to being a ninja. It's a real thing. It's not just like the equivalent of superheroes with karate fighting. Ninja is a thing.
I had a question that I thought of before, and it kind of fits in this area too, where like I didn't have a pet turtle. I already had a pet dog, and my parents definitely were not going to get me a turtle, knowing them. But one of the things that I loved the most about the Ninja Turtles was they were in New York City. I could go to New York City, and so I had like this connection to where this like my favorite thing was taking place, especially when the movie came out. Again, we'll talk about that at some other time. But like, how did that? I grew up on Long Island. You grew up in like Western New York and Bath. Like, how did you feel that connection? Was it cool being like, oh, hey, it's in the same state as me, I could go visit that? Or was it just like, whatever?
It was totally whatever to me because New York was as fictional to me at that age as Gotham or Metropolis, because it wasn't within reach. I couldn't go to New York. I was, 5 years old or whatever. And eventually, obviously, I got there and I live here now. But like, yeah, at the time, New York was just as fictional as anything in fiction.
Like, I remember being a kid and going into the city to like, go to the Radio City Christmas show or something like that, and standing in the subway and being like, maybe I'll see one of them.
Yeah, right. Especially when all like the TV commercials had it look like they were actually running around when the toys were out and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I absolutely wanted to, but I knew that New York just wasn't the kind of thing that I would ever see within that my age at that time.
Can we talk about the flashback?
Yes, that's exactly where I wanted to go next. Okay, so can we agree that Saki was designed blatantly to look like Bruce Lee?
100%.
Yeah, I did not piece that together until recently as well. Like, I remembered the character designs in my head, but when I really watched the other night and saw the character design for Saki, it's like, oh, Jesus, he's got his hair, he's got the chin, he's got everything. He's blatantly Bruce Lee. Which is kind of funny considering in like the 2003 animated series, they kind of depicted Yoshi as the Bruce Lee facsimile.
I was just fast forwarding to that point in the episode. And yeah, it's like things about this flashback that are just like kind of weird. Like they start off by talking about how like, oh yeah, Saki, he was more violent or something, but like he's just standing in the background of Yoshi sparring with somebody else who breaks his stick. Like, which, like, what is this? Was he teaching that guy? If you were the second in command, like, why are you so ashamed too?
There's so much that they just ask you to take a mulligan on. It's like, oh, they were buddies and then they're rivals. Okay, I guess.
Right. Oh man. Also, because I was fast forwarding and I noticed this real quick, I just wanted to pull back that when April is trying to get away from the thugs, she runs face first into a wall.
Yeah, it was like,
it's so funny.
Like, okay, we're supposed to suspend disbelief and it's dark in the sewers, but she was running for a long time. Like, there were several frames of her just like clopping along where any normal person would have like slowed down. Just wham, Wile E. Coyote.
All right, back to the flashback though.
Yeah,
because the flashback is ridiculous and funny for its own reason.
I just love the master, like, throw the bum out was one of my favorite lines. I busted a gut first time I saw that.
Throw the bum out!
I like that the introduction to them training as ninjas is just wall climbing.
Yep.
Well, like I guess that's an important skill. Like I don't want to say that like ninjas didn't have to do that, but it's just like that's all they did. That was the training.
Makes me want to go and participate in American Ninja Challenge dressed in a Ninja Turtle costume. How has that not happened yet?
Makes me. I want to look that up now.
All right, so let's move to the other flashback.
Oh, the best part of the original 87 like cartoon, which is who is Splinter.
Yeah. Do we want to get into that now? We can get into that now.
I feel like if we're gonna skip over, I mean, there's so many details. I'm watching the part now where Saki puts the dagger in Yoshi's kimono so he can't bow, and like they're standing over him but can't see the knife in the wall.
I mean, yeah, like that's an appropriate child-friendly pivot from murdering his wife,
right? I mean, like it's a clever reason, but it just practically is like, what? How did you not see that? And then he takes the dagger out. They're like, obviously, you're trying to kill him. Like, okay,
sure. Obviously. One thing that always kind of struck me that was interesting is that none of the other animated iterations ever touch on the full scope of the rivalry between Saki and Yoshi, as in how like there was an older brother.
Oh yeah. They just cut that out from the original comic.
I just find that interesting how that's consistently cut out in every other iteration, though. Like none of them have ever even begin to talk about Orokunagi.
Yeah, I'm sure it was done just for like expedience, to try and like keep it simple.
I think it would have been simpler if he was just like, I'm avenging my brother, rather than like, I put a knife in his shirt, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, well, none of this is simple.
No.
Like this next two episodes, like these first two episodes where you find out like the whole backstory. There's a point in this episode where it's just like, why does Shredder this?
Yeah.
And you don't find out until the next episode. You're like, oh, okay.
I mean, his entire motivation is like to rule the world, right? You know, the traditional bad guy. There's no I want to be rich crime boss, any of that. There's no honor in avenging my brother. It's just, I want to rule the world.
Well, it's also just really funny how in episode Shredder is really like, are those turtles? I need to know if they're turtles. He's just like really oddly obsessed about, and not because like, oh, whoa, those are weird creatures, but like, I have to specifically know if these are mutated turtles, and you do not know why until the next episode.
Yes.
So for the whole first episode, he just comes off as like insane.
Like an obsessive compulsive fanboy. Like standing outside of Radio City when they're coming out to sign autographs in the rain. Like Shredder is the ultimate turtle fanboy obsessor. He's like mailing them locks of his hair. All right, pop quiz time. What is the name of the kid who drops the turtles down the drain?
Oh, I don't, unless it's Matt Murdock. I don't know the name of it.
It is Chet Manley.
That is amazing.
Which is the most MST 3K big McLarge huge kind of name they could have applied to this. And that's canon, though. That's comic book canon.
That is amazing.
And I do think that they unofficially named the kid Chet Manley in the animated series as well. Where the hell is our Daredevil crossover, by the way? Oh
my God.
How the actual F have we gotten 2 Batman crossovers, which were amazing, by the way, a Power Rangers and Ghostbusters crossover, which all were phenomenal. And we haven't gotten Daredevil yet, guys.
Probably because Viacom doesn't want to work with Disney.
Oh, man. Driving me insane. Like, we need the Daredevil crossover.
Speaking of driving me insane, can I tell you the one thing that really irks me the most about this episode?
What's that?
Okay. I could get over the whole fact that, like, in this iteration, Yoshi is a human who gets turned into a rat instead of like Yoshi's pet rat becoming humanoid. Fine. It doesn't make any sense. It just straight up, it doesn't make any sense. The whole point of the mutagen in literally every other iteration is that it makes things more human. Yeah. That's why when Shredder gets the ooze on him in like Secret of the Ooze or like any other iteration, he becomes a bigger human. He doesn't become some different animal, but like the turtles were turtles. The mutagen gets on them. They get to be humanoid turtles. Cool. There is a rat, becomes a humanoid rat. Whatever. They changed it for this because for some reason they thought it was easier for a human to turn into a rat and teach ninjutsu than a rat learning ninjutsu and then teaching. I don't know. Whatever. It's dumb.
All of the iterations of their origin is dumb, to be fair. And I say that with all the love in my heart.
The thing that bothers me the most is the explanation they say in the episode is that the mutagen causes a transformation based off of whatever animal they had most recently been in contact with. And then they say for the turtles, it was a human because Yoshi was cleaning them off. But Yoshi had most recently been with the rats. No, he had most recently been with the turtles.
Right.
He was holding the turtles when he transformed into a rat.
I don't want to pat myself on the back too hard, but even as a little kid, like I had that little moment of like my brain went, wait, what?
It is like, this has to me always been a sticking point. I always hated that Yoshi became a rat instead of Splinter being the pet rat. Like I always loved the movie version of it. Because like again, when I was a kid, I hadn't read the original comic yet. But like I always had a problem with Yoshi becoming Splinter, and this is the sticking point. Because
I mean, we're from the same camp. We both prefer the comic origins where it's animals that get big. We could have hours upon hours of discussion, and I'm sure we will throughout all of this about the different mulligans and rules about how mutagen works in the different worlds.
Fair.
Like in this one, it's just something that Shredder made. It's not a byproduct of space aliens. It's not a byproduct of Earthbound Lab. It's not from a different dimension. It's just something Shredder made.
Yep.
And that's how it works as opposed to in the other iterations. I mean, hell, even IDW has two different versions of, there's ooze and then there's mutagen, and they're two different things that do two different things. So that was kind of a failsafe writing themselves out of the hole on that one. But yeah, the way that the ooze works in all the different versions is completely bogus. And again, I do want to say this for people who got all pissy about like the Michael Bay change to the origin story. Like all the versions of the origin is super dumb, and it's awesome, but it's dumb.
I mean, that was the point.
How is Splinter reading a Renaissance or a book on karate to learn ninja moves any worse than him reading a book on Renaissance painters to learn how to name anthropomorphic turtles? It's all stupid.
Yeah, but again, like that was the intention of Eastman and Laird. Like they wanted to come up with it was
absurdist. It was parody of the times. It was a parody of like how dead serious Frank Miller took all of his work.
It was a parody of Daredevil. It was a parody of Dark Knight Returns, like all that. Which
shout out to the full circle Dark Knight Returns homage that the final issue of The Last Ronin pays.
Oh, see, I still have to read it.
No spoilers. I'm just saying, like they pay their dues.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it was parody, but it was always done lovingly. It wasn't like a malicious intent, but it was designed to be ludicrous. I mean, the whole name. If you take Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles at face value, it's insane. It's an absolutely insane concept.
That's my favorite part about this series. Is just how ludicrous it is. Like how. Everything else, the Power Rangers, they go to space and they fight and stuff, and the Ghostbusters, they shoot ghosts, but like the Turtles are like, I guess they'll time travel this week.
Face Triceratop aliens.
What's another trope from 80s comics at a different dimension? Yeah, we're doing that too.
I like even just like, oh man, yeah, everybody's going to space. There's all these things. Yeah, okay, but did you meet a giant floating cowhead?
That licks you into another dimension? Yeah. I mean, so like we're getting way off task. We'll get back to you in a second. But like even the IDW recent retelling of the origin, like if people got mad about, and I'm not defending the Michael Bay films. I don't want that to come across like this. I'm just defending the franchise as a whole. Yeah. The IDW revisit, they changed that. The most recent comics changed the origin more than any other version. And no one had to stink about it because it was accepted, well written, and just as ludicrous.
Yeah, yeah. Just to bring it back to the episode, I really do love how they finish the flashback. And Splinter goes, and that's how they became the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's the first
Roll
time.
credits.
Yeah, right. Like that's the most biggest fanfare they're ever gonna get. So we'll talk more about mutagen and how those rules don't exist.
I just love. Well, they immediately break it in the first episode, and from there it's like, all right, do whatever you want.
Yeah. All right. So we've touched on the different versions of how Yoshi's either a rat. I agree with you. I think the entire concept of the rat getting bigger and avenging his master is a lot better than Yoshi training turtles to carry out his revenge. It speaks a lot louder.
Is not what they do in this series.
No, not at all. Because remember, like the original TMNT was supposed to be a one-off assassin story.
Yeah, but in this series, it's like, well, you were a freak accident turned you into these humanoid things, and the world above will never accept you. So I'm going to train you how to be ninjas so that you can protect yourselves. There is
the marketing pitch to kids in the 80s, though.
True.
You know, it's like teach yourself how to self-defense.
And their goal isn't to defeat the Shredder. They don't even know who the Shredder is. Their goal is to make Splinter human again.
Right.
Which is, for what it is, I think it is a stroke of genius, and how to make it a more appropriate story for young children.
I think it's just really interesting to go back and look at some of the thought processes that got him there, because at this point in our lives, it's become part of the ether. And I mean, yes, we are notorious. Our generation, between the YouTubes and the TikToks, are just piles of nostalgic revisiting and repackaging and overanalyzing. But it is interesting to watch how it got written its way out of how dark it was into how acceptable it is.
Yeah.
And how many of those things really do kind of sticky and mesh together. And most people still get the general big picture.
Yep. One final line from the flashback is when Splinter explains to April why they call him Splinter, and he just says, they nicknamed me Splinter for obvious reasons.
Because he chopped wood once.
Right. It's like, because you're breaking wooden boards. Why did they call you Pink Kimono?
Why didn't they call you Sport Tape on your feet?
Like, obviously having like a several minutes long explanation of the Daredevil connection in an animated kid show isn't gonna happen. Doesn't make sense.
To be fair, I scratch my head at it now, but when I watched it as a kid, I went, yeah, of course.
Obviously. He bit some wood once.
Yeah. So clearly he made splinters. All right. So we've got some good animation breaks coming up. We've got double Raphael's coming up.
Yeah, Donatello speaking with Raph's voice.
Can I just go ahead and point this out? This might be a bit of a obscure reference, but Vern looks exactly like current host of G4's Attack of the Show, Cassim G.
Oh my god!
To the extent where I kind of want to send a picture of Vern as a cool cumber for anybody else who's watching Attack of the Show these days and is in on the joke.
You should absolutely do that.
I think I'm going to do that. And I wanted to. This is a completely left field one, but Rob was a better Donnie than he was a Raph. Don't at me.
We could get to that. I mean, I think either this episode or next episode, we should talk about like the Turtles' characterizations in this, because Raph is the biggest change.
Yeah, clearly, because they couldn't have him be a rage case, even though they have zero problem with that nowadays.
Well, I feel like the other shows have done a good job of like, you know what, like kids get angry. it's everybody gets angry. It makes sense to have a character that can explore those things. And it's just really funny to me that in this first series, they were like, you know what, let's not go the whole anger route. What is the close? Yeah, we'll just make him a sarcastic prick.
Yeah, but okay, it worked because Raph has always been my favorite turtle, as you know that. And for both reasons, it's either like, oh, Raph is the grumpy one. Yeah, that's me. But Raph is a sarcastic jerk. Yeah, it's also me.
I also wanted to call out that like, this is just the first episode and there's already like an amazing amount of chemistry between the voice actors.
Oh yeah.
And
that cannot be undersold.
You know, like I haven't done a ton of research into this, so I don't know like if they've talked about how much time they had to prepare before, you know, like how many rehearsals or something like that. But just the core group, like the four turtles and April, like there is, you could see the connection between them, and the pace of the show is so quick, but their conversations flow so easily despite that.
Yeah, I like looking now and seeing things like how these voice actors are still at least friends. And they still, get together and hang out and have a good rapport when they go to Comic-Cons for signings and stuff. Clearly, they'll have their own careers, but you could tell when a good team has been assembled in a show. It speaks through the show and it speaks in the aftermath of the show. And this is definitely one of those great ensemble casts. I mean, look how many people participated later on and how many, we can get into this later, but how many celebrity voice actors wanted to be a part of this and continue to. They still stunt cast through Turtle stuff to this very day. I mean, it's not a new idea, but still people want to be a part of this.
Always a good sign of a great show is when like bigger, quote unquote, bigger celebrities come and be like, I want to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Rob Paulsen is one of my favorite people in Hollywood. Definitely top 3 voice actors of all time and just generally all around cool dude. Met him once, super nice. But yeah, I definitely want to say his version of Raph, while fine, his version of Donnie is superior. One of my favorites.
I feel like I could buy into that, but also that series is like probably my favorite animated series of the Turtles.
I think it's objectively the best that comes together. It's still not my personal favorite, but that's another conversation.
True. I have not rewatched the 2003 in a really long time either. So if the time comes that we get to that series, who knows? Maybe I'll be like, oh, right, this is like pretty much the comics.
Yeah, I would actually just started kind of poking around with that a little bit, rewatching the 2K3 because I had not watched that since it came out before we started doing this. So I've got a little bit of column A and column B going on in my mind.
Gotcha. How about the old lady at street level?
Yeah, I mean, that's the most accurate representation I think has ever been made of New York City on film.
She is the best character in the whole episode.
Kind of a crime that she wasn't a recurring character.
She just, first of all, again, turtles are the worst ninjas.
My next note is they didn't even try stealth.
They just like open a manhole cover, land right on the street in the middle of the night.
Better than this next episode when they do it in the middle of the day.
This old lady just sees, screams, and then pulls out a machine gun from her grocery cart.
No, I mean that's what you do. It was the Ed Koch era in New York City. You had to be prepared.
Oh my god, it's so funny to think like this. I want to actually look up like where the writers of the show came from, because like if this is their thought of New York in the 80s, that is amazing.
I do want to say that I think the Turtles as a franchise consistently characterizes New York better than most everybody else in Hollywood. Like they show that the streets are always wet, which is fact. New York streets are always wet. And you can almost smell New York through the first movie. Like it's the closest thing to smell-o-vision I think you're ever going to get. But yeah, crazy characters on the street. I just wanted my takeaway with some of the street performers and like the magic card guy. Like that is so not aggressive enough.
3-card Monty in a kid show.
And he gets assaulted for it.
Like that was the only thought I had was like, there's just straight up gambling in this show. And then Leo just chops the table in half.
That was Times Square, man. Oh, how do you feel about the character designs? And we talked a little bit about the ugliness, but it's not a secret that the animation shifts hard as this series goes on.
Oh, yeah. The Turtles.
The first episode to me is the peak with the beak line they had. I think that was an essential part that really kind of tied their designs together. Being really short and squat, basically walking around like they got a stick up their butt all the time. Like that's how little mutant turtles should be 4 feet tall and as wide as they are tall, and just like these chonkers who run around but are like somehow magically stealthy, even though these ones are not.
I was definitely going to say that like their walking animation is hilarious.
Yeah, they waddle. They straight up waddle.
It's so funny. It's like they just mutated, and even though they've been mutated for like, I don't know, however many years, they never actually got used to walking on 2 legs.
Yeah. All right, so they're on their way to Ninja Pizza. They are tracing some very loose clues that they've got. But have you noticed some of the other stores in the background on the New York streets when they're walking around in their very well concocted disguises?
I mean, yeah, first of all, love all night men's clothing.
Yes. All night men's clothing. I wanted to point out jewel vampires. Which, what? Do you suck the jewel's blood? You know what? I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I did.
Now that's so funny.
I did want to also acknowledge that the Turtles, in mere seconds before, I think it's somewhere between 20 to 30 seconds before, it's like, we know all about humans that they get from watching TV. And then they spend the next minute and a half up on the street level incessantly questioning everything like a toddler on coffee.
Yep.
Why do humans want to make themselves look uglier?
Two things about that. One, April is at least in her 20s, if not older. And she's having the absolute best and appropriate responses to being stuck with 4 teenagers.
Mm-hmm.
And two, I really appreciate the run-on gag that she can't tell the difference between any of them and can't remember their names.
It only lasts for like 8 seconds, though. She only screws up like twice.
But or
3 times.
Yeah, she misnames 3 of them, but it's really interesting because it is, one, completely random and just a fill for time. But 2, on the flip side of that, it's actually like a really clever device for helping kids match the mask colors to the names.
Oh, I never thought about it that way. You're right. It would have helped.
It's the only other reason I could think of. Like, they're introduced once, and now, okay, a couple minutes have passed. Let's reintroduce the names with the because they point out like, oh, like I'm Leonardo, and it's just okay.
I mean, it's in the theme song too, so
cool. Yeah, so it's like the 3rd time, but like to really just hammer home, like, okay, here's a repetition. Here's who the characters are. All their designs are really similar. The masks are what tell the difference. Blue is Leo, orange is Mikey, red is Raph, purple is Donatello. There we go. Like it was just like, what else could be the purpose of this really strange April can't tell the difference between them moment?
It's kind of a weird generational divide because I wanted to make the crack about how while you're pointing out that Leo's blue and Mikey's orange, the purists like myself are sitting back here going, well, they're all supposed to wear red. But yeah, that's an interesting teaching device that they would have used. But also, here's something that just kind of popped into my head. You know, the Turtles, they all look alike besides the colors and their weapons. And in the original Mirage comics, you could only identify them by their weapons. For obvious reasons, the character designs remained the same. The character designs changing has only been more broached on in recent times. Like, there were slight variances in the movie. That sounds like it's not giving the Jim Henson team enough credit. But the Turtles are still roughly the same height and roughly the same colors as skin color. But in later iterations, especially right up to Rise when they're different being species, you know, Donnie's gotten taller and skinnier, and Raph has gotten bigger, Mikey's gotten shorter, and the different characterizations have come out more as the franchise has lived on. But OG, like, they were all supposed to be basically one person.
Yeah, I'm really interesting history with that, in that, like, the first movie they were really, each one they got progressively more the same, to the point of like the 3rd movie they are identical. Well,
that's budgetary reasons that we know now in retrospect were crappy, but
true. Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a budgetary reason, but it is interesting over time to see how, like, which versions they do accentuate the differences between them. And like the movies, it was pretty much like they are all the same, but like, you know what, everybody has different faces, so like, why wouldn't they have different faces? Cool.
Yeah.
But then you do start getting into like the physical differences, where I mean, like 2K3 had different shades for each of the turtles, so that was
in the original toys too. They had different shades, and in the video games they had different shades. But in the TV show, I think they cut the budget and just went, they're all green.
Yeah. But I think like some of them were starting to hint pretty early on that, like, you know, they're not literally brothers.
But I mean, that was one of the first things that they abandoned from Mirage, was like, well, you can't make a character driven series about the same character copy pasted 4 times.
Yeah.
And the only real difference in the original comics was like who said what and how much. And it was like Leo and Raph did 90% of the talking. Mikey has 1 line in the original book, and it's just whining. Right?
Yeah,
so
he was the youngest.
I mean, that made sense for being the little brother. It's interesting that they spun him into party dude because he'd be the least serious one. We're getting a little heady on this one.
Yeah. Well, let's pull it back to the series, which there is just some like really rapid fire, both intended and unintended comedy.
I think some of the Foot Clan jokes are some of the best in the entire series. My notes here were when they're in the security building and the receptionist has the Foot Clan walk up and they're all just wearing cute little police hats.
Yep.
My only note is sus.
It's just there. I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. One, how come no one in town is curious about all the ninja themed shops all put together? Like,
There's Chinatown in New York. I guess there could be Japantown.
I mean, is this the ninja district?
Yes. As someone who lives near the Egyptian district in Queens, that's a thing.
That pizza guy just casually just a katana as a gimmick.
Yep.
This is really where the accents are really bad.
Yeah, clearly.
To call it out. The foot ninjas and security caps is amazing. And just how blatantly crimes are being committed at the front desk of this giant building.
Yeah, there's another one like just generally depicting how crime ridden the Japanese town or area in New York really is questionable.
Yeah, for sure.
I do want to point out though, like we got to talk about, you and I are going to talk about sound design a bunch as this series goes on. I want to point out my undying love for the katana chop sound in this show.
Oh man,
which just sounds like somebody closing a heavy book. It's like, that's not a cutting sound at all. We'll talk more about sound.
What about
how about why do the foot soldiers have human hands? Can somebody please clarify this? Why are they robots? Because like that traumatized me as a kid because I just accidentally watched RoboCop about the time I was getting into Ninja Turtles. So I remember thinking like, oh God, are they like Murphy? Are they all just bloody corpses inside that have been reanimated as androids? Is that really the darkness that has come to our lives?
Yep, that is New York in the 80s.
But why do they have human hands? Why do they have to have human hands?
Well, because we don't find out for like another 2 to 5 minutes that they are robots. So
fair, but they could have been wearing.
They look like humans.
They could have been wearing gloves at any given time, and like learning that they're bots and have people hands is far more traumatizing.
It's also like they are very obviously robots in just how like elongated their legs and arms are. Like,
yeah,
no one hunches over like that.
I still think having the real ninjas in the movies and stuff is way cooler, like the Foot Clan being people. But let's be honest, the design of those SWAT guards that they are was outstanding. They were so gangly and awkward.
And again, it's like it's a really great idea for like, hey, this comic is inherently violent, but we cannot do this for an age group of like 4 and 5 year olds. So, I know, we'll just have them chop up robots.
I mean, that was the solution to every show that had violence in it. Just make them robots.
Them all freaking out about the check at the pizza parlor. And
apropos.
We do not see if they paid it or not. So I just have to assume they left.
That was something I always wanted to talk about is how the turtles maintain their lives. Like I can imagine that Donnie's a very proficient dumpster diver. How the hell did they order delivery pizza? Where did they get a tenner from?
Okay, in the movies, I assume it's just because people drop money and they steal it.
They have to, right? But is that really enough to subsist on?
No, I don't know. It's at least in the CGI movie, they all had jobs, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that was kind of a neat thing, especially, boy, wouldn't that be kind of a funny thing if like in the work from home world that we've built for ourselves, if the turtles, that'd be an episode of a show. Donnie doing the IT help thing again. That was great. What else we got?
That line to me is like such comedic gold.
It's oh my God, I'm so glad you said that because that's what that was my next note. It's just that inflection. April's purse.
April's purse.
Also, she's not carrying a purse at all ever in the entire show. In any episode, she's not carrying a purse, and all of a sudden, it's just hanging off the corner of a skyscraper building that they can see from the ground.
Oh my God! I just like Leo just constantly walking into like lampshading everybody.
Yeah. This is where some of the animation stuff goes off the wall, though. Like, this is definitely a case where there's 5 turtles standing on the roof. And like there's 2 Raphaels standing next to each other. Oh man. Yeah.
Clang?
April's purse.
Did you say clang?
That is one of the most memorable moments of the entire series. Just putting that out there.
I kind of want to get Rob Paulson to do a cameo of that.
Yes. Oh, that'd be amazing. I also have a note here that says the action never topped this. This rooftop battle is one of the best.
I think the animation, like when Mikey throws off the coat and does the diving kick when they find out they're robots and they don't have to hide anymore. Which, like, okay, first of all, they keep the coats on when they think they're humans, like just casually wielding weapons.
I mean, trench coats hit a lot of stuff in the 80s for people in New York. We don't have to get into the details, but I had a note for
Mikey throws off that coat, and it is the coolest moment in the episode.
It is. It's super sick. But I also have to point out that it just says robots equal let's rock minus logic. Because that's all he says is robots, let's rock. And it's just like, okay.
Yeah, they don't have to explain. It's just like, let's get violent. But man, if I could just like I just want to take the still of Mikey in the air with the nunchucks. Like, that is such a cool, like, whoever drew that, I hope that's all over their house. Like,
that should be a tattoo. Yeah, having that original animation frame, that would be pretty dope. We're getting close to the end. The last few notes I have are so much plot convenience, nostalgic for arcade game, because going up the Channel 6 building with even though it doesn't technically flood in the game, very remembrant. And the one thing that kind of threw me off now is just like, okay, so they burst the water main, right? And then the sprinklers start filling the building, and that building is airtight. 1, props to the architect. That's
100%
amazing. 2, that's like the entire city's water supply. Like, people are going to be dying.
Yeah.
Because there's no water in the hospitals. Yeah, it's completely from floor to ceiling. How many stories is the Channel 6 building? It's got to be like, what, 30, 40? There's people dying. That's all the water in the city, all the potable water in the city.
There's this really cool bit of animation where they show the outside of the building, and you can see the water filling up each level of glass. Yeah. But it just fills up like a glass of water.
Yes.
Which is, would, like, obviously you wouldn't have like, no one would bother to spend the animation to show it like swirling from the outside of the building, but it is just really funny to see the water level rise as if the floors don't exist.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's got the big open stairwell. We've established that. That's where the bowling balls fall down.
Of course. But you skipped over like the really like one of my last favorite part of this episode, which is just everything Shredder does in the end of this episode.
Oh, his tantrum?
Just, okay, so they get into the building and Shredder is like surveying them, right?
Yeah.
He's still looking at all of like the magical cameras that exist all over Manhattan for him. But 2, he's just also on camera for no reason. Like,
oh yeah.
He doesn't have to be.
That did not occur to me at all.
He wasn't talking to anybody in that moment. He was just on camera staring at them through the monitor. So they're like, who's that guy? And then he goes, they mustn't find out about my Technodrome. And then like 2 seconds later, he makes a building-wide announcement for everyone to return to the Technodrome, a thing they had no idea existed, had never heard the word before, but now you've planted a seed in them.
And then it's all they could talk about for the rest of the episode. That's all every other word they say for the rest of the episode, and the next episode is just Technodrome this, Technodrome that.
And then the last thing that is just a little bit of like detail that I really appreciate, because this episode is so full of continuity errors. Like you were saying, there's like 5 turtles and 2 Raphaels and talking like Raphael for no reason, but they do make sure to show Leo picking up his sword that he used as a grappling hook.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's good attention to detail.
Oh man.
And that was the first episode of Ninja Turtles, the 1987 animated series, Turtle Tracks. I think it holds up with nostalgia goggles.
It It really does. Honestly, like the animation, surprisingly good for what it is, especially in standard definition.
It's still watchable. So the perspective here, though, is you've got a small child, and I'm to the understanding that you have made her try to start watching Turtles. What has her takeaway been so far?
So I rewatched episode 1, Turtle Tracks, by myself. The most recent time that I watched it prior to this was a couple weeks ago, and I had my daughter watch it with me, and her reaction about like 10 minutes in was, can we stop watching this? So she's turning 4 this month. She might be a little bit too young for the Ninja Turtles still, but I'm trying.
I mean, that's right about the age when I was getting into it, so we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. It's funny because like she likes the characters. I have a lot of stuff around the house, a lot of Ninja Turtle stuff around the house. So she's been familiar with the characters before ever seeing anything, she's not reading the comics for sure. She
said cowabunga before she said dada, so.
I will say, I feel like I should have included this in my credentials, but her name is April, and I was able to meet Kevin Eastman at Comic-Con a couple years ago, who drew a drawing of April, the character, for my daughter, which now hangs in her bedroom. So she has a lot of familiarity with the characters, and there's like some stuffed animal versions of the turtles that she plays with. But when it comes to the actual show so far, we've watched the first episode of Rise and the first episode of the original series, and she hasn't quite found the interest in it yet.
Yeah, I mean, she's going to carve her own path, and it's not like there isn't a plethora of options for her out there for entertainment, especially specifically targeted at her as a demo. Sure. I did want to say, like, I was there for that when you got to meet Kevin and do that art piece, and that was, it really was kind of like a life-defining moment for me. I know it means a lot more to you, but just being there to be part of something like that as we age as friends together, and it's like you're carrying it on to the next generation. That was a pretty special moment.
I mean, he is awesome, and I think there's like nothing better than, I mean, there's that old adage like don't meet your heroes kind of thing, but there's nothing better than actually getting to meet somebody and then being as cool as you hope they would be.
Oh yeah, you're just afraid that it's going to go the other way.
Like the people that were helping him manage the line were like no personal drawings, anything, like nothing like that. And like, they weren't trying to be mean, they weren't being bad, and they were just keeping the line moving. There were a lot of people online. They wanted to make sure that nobody was there for like 10 minutes or something. But when I got up there and I explained the situation to him, he was just like, oh my God, of course, like pick out a thing. And he just took out a blank piece of comic paper, like the covers that they were using, and drew it on that, and was like, I mean, it was just brilliant. It was amazing.
Yeah. All right. In the spirit of Duderonomy, let's talk about the takeaway from the first episode of TMNT 87. As with everything in the 80s, if it didn't come with a PSA, it had to come with a moral lesson. Mm-hmm. So G.I. Joe got off real easy. For Turtles, at least for me, they touch on stuff. They've done everything from like addiction to abuse and different versions throughout the years. The 87 cartoon being notoriously light, but I still think that in this first episode they really hammer in, not just the most black and white, vague versions of good versus evil, but I really think the first episode is all about building that surrogate family. I don't know about you.
I was trying to find it, like, and I don't think they're quite there yet. I think like it builds up more, and it starts to build up even more in episode 2, which obviously we're going to talk about next. But like, yes, I don't know, right? Because like the whole flashback sequence, that's what it's all about. It's loose
at best, and you have to like read between the lines to get there. But the only real takeaway I can, because first and foremost, the first episode of Ninja Turtles was a big toy commercial.
Absolutely.
But like I said, they essentially had to put something in there for the FCC to let them broadcast. So I think my personal takeaway, and they get better, clearer definitions of this as the series goes on, is like the first episode is just straight up family is what you make it.
Yep, I can get behind that. I think like, and we'll talk about this as we keep going through the series and pushing forward from that. But like, that really does become the calling card for the Ninja Turtles over time. And I feel like the original comic, like that was not the case, you know, maybe like eventually, but like the first comic, I mean, you already talked about it, but like Splinter raises these turtles to avenge him. Like that is some serious emotional and physical abuse.
Oh yeah.
You're training your children, you know, adopted or otherwise, to be killers so that they could avenge your honor. Like, I mean,
it totally slaps with the Kurosawa film
too.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like right now we're not doing a video of the podcast, but I'm wearing a shirt that I got from Comic-Con a couple of years ago that says change is constant, but family is forever. And I really love how those two things have become really the overarching theme of the Ninja Turtles. Change is constant, family is forever. And that whole found family thing really does start here.
Let me point out that the first episode of the 2003 animated series is just simply titled Things Change.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought Turtles was a really good entertainment franchise that represents coming of age. And they just keep improving on that formula. I want to reference again the Last Ronin series. It's such a good bookend, and I would highly recommend anybody read it, whether you watch the 87 cartoon or the movies, or you haven't even touched Turtles in years. If you had any kind of appreciation for the Turtle franchise, Last Ronin is a must read.
Yeah, I feel like we're constantly going to come back to this point of the Ninja Turtles, and I like personally, like I think one of the questions that we can investigate as we keep going down is like, you know, what makes this franchise last the way that it does? What really stays with you? It's like, you know, as a kid, it was like, okay, yeah, they're like cool, like swords, fighting ninjas. What's not to like about this? Like all the, like, obviously the stuff that was marketed as toys in every episode, like oh cool, hey look, there's this like the turtle van and the pizza thrower and the blimp and all this different stuff. Like that's the stuff that attracts you as a child. But the fact that like I am 36 years old and I love this franchise just as much is because like so much of it really has aged with us, and it's not really nostalgia because there's new stuff all the time, but they keep finding a way to root it in these concepts that I just think are super powerful. And it really does keep coming back to family, to found family. I think there's certainly an aspect that maybe this episode doesn't do the best job of, but it does over as the series continues and in future iterations too. But like, I don't think it can be downplayed or overstated how important it was to see like obviously there's a lot of like teenage boy stuff, like overrepresentation of like boys in media is absolutely true. But I think one of the things that the Turtle stands out about it is that like the way they dealt with anger and personal relationships and family relationships and disagreements with each other, and like how not to do that, like how to be a healthy individual and a member of a group was something that a lot of other shows as a kid were like sorely missing out on.
I like the camaraderie too, but I also want to point out the importance of the other side of that. Like, again, citing that I grew up an only child and was I very much longed to have a brother or somebody. You know, that camaraderie and some of the innocent teasing they even did with each other was something that like that was alien to me. You know, it's not like I didn't have friends. I'm not trying to make myself out to be a sad sack, but like just the brothers picking on each other was like, oh, that looks great. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's stuff like that I think is amazing that you could pull out. And again, like things that we'll come back to. We were talking, started recording, but like the idea that Splinter's a single parent, that he is an adoptive father, all those things are like super important and don't get a lot of representation. And I don't think people really talk about how the Turtles have been doing this for like 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, when you got the right formula, it's more than just lightning in a bottle. You know, I've said Ghostbusters several times on this episode, and I love Ghostbusters, but nothing will ever match that first movie, no matter how hard they try. And as much as I defend Ghostbusters 2 and heartfelt love the nostalgia of Ghostbusters Afterlife and all the cartoons. And I'm still reading the comics. Nothing really does quite hold a candle to that first iteration. And I don't think Turtles is that way. It has grown. Turtles has continued to grow, and that formula has continued to refine, but never really change either. Like you said, the surrogate family, that is the key, in my opinion. But I mean, they've even further emphasized that in recent times. You know, how many times have we heard the term the fifth turtle, right? Everything from Casey Jones to April O'Neil to Zach from the
oh wow, yeah,
the CBS cartoon. And then, as poorly received as it was, Venus de Milo in The Next Mutation. We've had other people kind of like slot in as like surrogate brothers. We got Kino from TMNT 2. We got Woody from the IDW comic book series. And then most recently, Jenica, their new adoptive sister, which was handled so well. Like, that was written in so well. And I was apprehensive because I, too, was not a big fan of the Venus de Milo inclusion, but it was just executed poorly. There's nothing wrong with the concept.
Yeah.
And now they're even working on fixing her in the comics. So who the hell knows?
I mean, there's so many, like, I think
Harder?
at this point in my life, I think IDW is my favorite. I really do. Like,
It's the most comprehensive for sure.
It's my favorite iteration of the Turtles. And one of the reasons that I like it so much is like the extended cast of it, that over time there does seem to be like a club almost, you know, of like that, like they've tried here and there and they've expanded the cast in different ways. And I don't know, like it always felt like, well, it's the Turtles, it's April and Casey, and that's the group. There might be some other people who come in and out, like Kino, or like you know, like when the Fast Forward series continuation of 2K3, like there, but even then it's like, okay, it's the child of stuff. But I just love all.
There's a little bit of that in Last Ronin too, like the legacy thing.
True, yeah. And I just really love all the characters that they bring in to the IDW series that take a lot of the concepts that they've tried over the years, but feel like they just executed in such an excellent way. And I think, like, you know, every single writer that series has had, but Sophie Campbell is like amazing.
IDW is objectively incredible. The iteration, everything about it has been truly excellent. They took something that was a Monster of the Week show in two different previous iterations and made it actually work and make sense. Like the way Sophie Campbell, the current showrunner, the way she's taken, you know, these characters that was just like, oh, and this one's called Pizza Face and he's a mutated pizza chef. The end. And like, Pizza Face is a bad example because that hasn't happened in IDW yet. But even like Mutagen Man, they made him like a tragic hero.
Yeah.
And they work him in organically, and these characters recur. And like the Mutanimals are a consistent support system. And that, like, the Mutanimals were kind of born out of the Archie comics and then heavily referenced in the 87 cartoon. So these are old ideas too that just continue to find new life.
I also, like, I want to call out, and again, I know we're getting a little off topic from like the series, but like, you know, it's a franchise as a whole. Like, I loved the Hamato clan when they started to build that up in the comics, and then when it transitions into, we won't get into like crazy spoilers of the comic here, but like the Splinter Clan is so cool. Like, I love Alopex, I love Jenica, I love all of the characters that they've brought in from Mutant Town. You know, like, it's just there's so much about that series that really takes all the things that the franchise has built up over the years and been like, yeah, it is about found family. It is about the people who you care the most about. And like, what good is ninja skills? Good is honor if you're not using those things to protect the people that you love. And I think the fact that like over the years, TMNT has genuinely found that heart is really awesome.
Well said. A couple things for down the road before we wrap up here today. You've mentioned things that have sparked my imagination. I want to talk about, you talked about Alopex. I want to talk about some of the different versions of characters that have been kind of reworked, because Alopex is a bit of a iteration on like Ninjara from the Archie comics. Yep. We've got Armagon the Shark, and in currently IDW we have Bludgeon the Shark, which are very different characters, but not without similar backgrounds and roots. And even Jenica versus Venus de Milo. I'd love to talk about how some of these characters have been reworked a little bit more in the roles that they fulfill. I also want to talk someday, and I'm sure we'll get off on tangents like these. Like we say that this is going to be about the 87 cartoon, but we spent the last like 15 minutes talking about IDW comics. But I want to talk about comparing and contrasting finales. More specifically, how they handle the future, because in every iteration of the Turtles, they go to the future in some way. In Mirage with Renette, in the 2012 CG animated film, Sierra Neely, they do that Mad Max thing. Archie Comics, they have the future Turtles and the Cyber Samurai Turtles, and they all skew really, really suddenly dark. Like that is something that every Turtles has done, is like go to the future where it's post-apocalyptic, no matter how kiddie it is otherwise.
True. Yeah. I mean, I still think there's I actually just got confused in my head, because there is it's not the future, but I remember there's in the correct me if I'm wrong, you know the original series better than I do, but when humanity opens up to, like, when humanity recognizes that aliens are real, there's this moment where like the earth opens up and there's more like aliens present on Earth, and the Turtles can just like be on the surface now.
Oh yeah, I thought that was a really fascinating social commentary that took part in the oftentimes forgotten Volume 4 that was written by Peter Laird. Yeah, the social commentary about the different species coming to Earth and how Mikey essentially works as like an ambassador for Earth, and how the Utroms are like a bunch of negotiators and diplomats and stuff. Yeah, I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, another character that we should add to that like comparison is the Rat King.
Yes, but the Rat King stayed the Rat King, even though he did change in characterization a lot. I was thinking like literally characters who have changed names, but they're filling the same shoes.
Gotcha.
But that's a whole nother conversation, is the transformation of the Rat King. And because, you know, Shredder's always going to be a dude who's in big armor and he's big mad. The Rat King has gone everything from being like a sociopath to like a magic guy.
Yep.
To like literally the Pied Piper.
Yeah, like a god version of the Pied Piper.
Yeah. Boy, there's going to be a lot to talk about. We're going to be doing this for a while.
Yeah. Well, we hope you enjoyed it.
We do hope you enjoyed it, and we wanted to leave you on the theme of Duderonomy. We're going to provide daily affirmations for everybody, because we want to definitely leave a positive spin no matter how negative we get. And as the series goes on, we're probably going to get into some slogs, because I know like by the end of the animated 87 cartoon, I was like, boy, I don't want any part of this anymore.
It's not so good.
It's not good. But as far as the daily affirmation goes, we're going to keep it on brand. It's called Daily Pizzamation. So for those of you out there looking for motivation in your world, look at yourself in the mirror and speak the mantra, I am the pizza chef of my life. I build its crust and I choose its toppings. And with that, we leave you. Thanks for listening, all four of you who found this somewhere buried in a GeoCities site 20 years from its original debut. I've been Brian.
And I'm Dan.
And hopefully we'll see you again for another episode of this down the road. Thanks for tuning in, and cowabunga.
Duderonomy is produced by Brian Van Gelder and me, Dan Spitaleri. Brian edits and mixes the show and also designed our show art. Our theme music is composed by Mario Sello Nuñez. You can hear more of his music on Spotify, which we've linked to in the show notes. Find us on Twitter at Duderonomy_TMNT and send email to deuteronomy.tmnt@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Cowabunga!